updates. But this would conflict with the entire Petscop YouTube channel, as these videos were uploaded publicly for the world to see. They weren't unlisted, so why would Paul post these videos publicly but then address the audience like they're one person? Maybe Paul isn't even the one in control of the channel and someone else is pulling the strings. After some extremely narrow walkways, Paul enters in a room with pink furniture. At the end of the room we see a mirror, and beyond that mirror, a copy of ourselves appears on the reflection side. It has the same oversized feet and torso as Paul, but instead of having the same head, it has a menacing drawing of a girl's face instead, with vacant eyes and a frightening smile. This head looks very similar to the one we found in the loading screen when Paul first arrived here. The creature follows Paul's movements perfectly, much like any reflection, but then Paul walks behind a shelf and something changes.
What the fuck?
The creature isn't copying Paul anymore, it's moving sporadically on its own volition. It's still following Paul somewhat, but not exactly. It loses attention and it trails off, only to quickly attempt to correct itself. It seems to have very poor attention, much like a child. A few moments later, the creature corrects its behavior and starts copying Paul's movements perfectly again. It's gone back to a reflection. Also note how the floor says quitter's room backwards, but on the reflected side it says the same thing, only the correct way round. This could indicate we're not in our own reality anymore, but a mirror one. A reality similar to our own, but subtle things are different, or maybe it could signify something much darker. Take for example the mirror room from Silent Hill 3. We see a reflection of the game's protagonist, Heather. On the reflection side, a mass of tendrils leaves the reflection and enters our own side of the mirror, corrupting the room and eventually killing Heather. Are we the innocent person in this dark world, or is our perception skewed and we're the invader without even knowing it? Seems like a loose resemblance to Silent Hill, but come on, this is the only time I'm going to be able to make that comparison. I'll sure as heck take it. Paul then walks to one of the walls and we see a note stuck to it.
This is backwards. It says, do you remember being born?
Paul then leaves and we find ourselves exiting through the same door we entered at the beginning, only now the door is facing away from the camera. And with that, Petscop 2 concludes. Petscop 3 was uploaded the 2nd of April 2017, a day after Petscop 2. In this video, Paul walks past a wall with giant text saying, "Good grief and alas." This quote is very important as it was also said in the Dr. Seuss book, Daisy Head Maisie. In said book, a girl called Maisie has a daisy flower grow on her head and she's mocked and bullied for being different. This links back to Care NLM, as NLM, or Nobody Loves Me, is what Maisie said near the end of the book.
Go home. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me.
Notice how Maisie and Care both show their distress in a similar way. The most morbid thing
Tender Mac is back at Slim Chickens. We start with a 3-cheese blend of Parmesan, Colby, and Cheddar to make our legendary mac.
About this whole premise with Care, it's the opposite ending to the Dr. Seuss book. As with Maisie, the last petal ends with "They love me."
Don't worry, Maisie. They love you!
But in Petscop, the petal ends with "They love me not." It's almost like looking through a mirror. Paul then comes across some sort of shaft and he comes to the conclusion he has to place something inside it.
I think you have to put something there.
A bit more exploring and Paul stumbles across an easel with a canvas on it. Interacting with the canvas, Paul can make a face with many choices of eyes, eyebrows, and noses. Paul inputs random facial features and seems to have triggered something as the room begins to shake violently. When he walks to the doorframe, we see that the entire room is moving, almost like an elevator. So we gather that putting specific faces onto the canvas takes Paul to different rooms. Eventually the elevator reaches its destination and we find ourselves in what appears to be a child's bedroom. There appears to be a child, or something shaped like a child, sitting down on the bed. It appears to be rendered into the background itself, so I can safely say it isn't going to get up and jump scare anybody. Paul can't interact with the child, but observes the table and we see an 8-ball and a red truck. Paul then returns to the elevator and enters another random string of faces onto the canvas, taking him to another room. This room doesn't look too dissimilar from the previous one, apart from the obvious change in colour. Paul does this multiple times with nothing much of note, but Paul reckons that these rooms are randomly generated.
It seems like there are many combinations of these faces. So, if I were to guess, these rooms are, because there's not much variation between these rooms, they're probably generated in some way.